Are you trying to scare us, Dave? Testing 1, 2, 3.
I am still missing Toon and Sierra.
Okay, Donna, I got one more minute on my clock, so we'll give them that time at least. And then maybe one more minute after that. Okay, there's Jenny. And so all we're missing is Toon, is that correct? Oh, you're muted, I think, Donna.
Sorry, I'm missing Toon and Sierra.
Oh, and Sierra, my apologies. All
And
right,
there's Toon.
great. Okay, it's 1 minute after, folks, and we are anticipating a fairly long night, possibly, and a lot of public participation. So we're just going to go ahead and get started, and ideally Sierra will jump on here and come on board. So with that, I'd like to call to order the March 1st, 2022 Missoula Consolidated Planning Board meeting. And let's go ahead and start our roll call, please.
Thank you. Josh Schrader.
Here.
Josh Schrader's present. Ellie Costello said she couldn't make it. Toon Pham.
Present.
Toon Pham is present. Dory Galels.
Present.
Dory Galels is present. Sierra Farmer. Sierra Farmer is absent. Dave Loomis.
Here.
Dave Loomis is present. Micah Sewell.
Present.
Micah Sewell is present. Rick Hall.
Present.
Rick Hall is present. Shane Morrissey.
Present.
Shane Morrissey is present. Sean McCoy.
Present.
Sean McCoy is present. Mr. Chair, we have 8 regular members. We have a quorum. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you. All right, with roll call being finished, the next part of the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 15th, 2022 meeting. Ideally, everybody got an opportunity to look those over. And if I could get a motion for the approval of the minutes, that'd be outstanding.
I'll move that we approve the minutes as written.
Thank you, Rick.
I'll second.
Seconded by Shane, I believe. And we will just do a yay or a nay vote on that. So all those in favor of approving the minutes from February 15th, 2022, say yay.
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 Yay. All those opposed? Hearing none opposed, unanimous approval. And moving on to the next portion of the agenda, we have our public comment on items not, I'd like to emphasize, not on the agenda. So this is public comment for anything outside of tonight's meeting. If there's anybody interested in making a comment on that, then you're welcome to call in and make your comments. And I will read out here the different ways that you can do that. If you are online and joining us via Zoom or MCAT or whatever, you can, well, via Zoom, sorry. You can click on meetings, And raise your hand if you want to chime in, and I will call on you. And if you are calling in by phone, which is audio only, and perhaps watching on MCAT, you can call in via your cell phone using 1-253-215-8782. Or if you're a landline user, you can call in using 1-888-475-4499. And if you are seeing this on MCAT or on Zoom, there are other numbers you can call in on. I'm just not going to read them all out. So if you're calling in via landline or cell phone, the webinar ID is 842-9399-6424. One more time for somebody that may be just listening. The webinar ID is 842-9399-6424. The password is 999636. Again, that is 999636. And in order to raise your hand, it's *9. In order to mute yourself, it is *6. And please try and remember that if you are calling in via the telephone, it is, and also watching via Zoom or NCAT or some other device on your computer or whatnot, that it is very important for you to mute your device that you are watching and just talk into your phone. If you do not mute the device that you are watching on, then we will get an echo or some feedback or something along those lines. And that usually interrupts your opportunity to make a comment. So we will probably just give this a minute to see if anybody is wanting to join in here for that opportunity to comment. Because again, we are anticipating a lot of public comment for tonight's main presentation. So just going to give that about a minute and then we'll move ahead. Okay, I am not seeing anybody raising hands for this portion of the meeting at the moment. If something comes up, we will maybe try and get back to it. But we're going to go ahead and just keep moving ahead here so we can get to the public comment portion of tonight's meeting. So with that, that brings us to staff announcements. And for planning board members, there was a memo attached from Bailey. Bailey is not going to present her memo tonight, but she did want me to make sure that all planning board members please read her memo if you have not had an opportunity already. Oh, outstanding. There's Sierra. So please read that memo. If you haven't already had the opportunity, there's some important information in there about the attendance for March 22nd meeting that we have that is coming up, which is really important. And if for some reason you do not anticipate being able to attend the March 22nd meeting, please let staff know as soon as possible. That is a pretty important meeting, and we want to make sure that we have a quorum, and we know that we have a full docket of meetings this month. So we just want to make sure that everybody that can attend lets us know. So if you can attend, so that is the staff announcement portion of the agenda, which brings us up to the public hearings portion of our agenda tonight. And tonight we are reviewing the Missoula County Zoning Code Update and Zoning Map. We're going to have a presentation by Andrew Hagemeyer, and I believe he will be joined by Jenny Dixon and Lindsay. Oh, Lindsay, I might butcher your name here. Romana Yellow.
Good enough.
Sorry about that. All with the Missoula County Community and Planning Services. And with that, I am just going to turn it over to Andrew.
All right, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, can.
Excellent. All right, so thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the planning board and members of the public who are listening in. Thank you very much for attending the meeting tonight. And I'm going to share my screen, and we've prepared a presentation for y'all. And if everything's working right, you should see my screen in the presentation. And my name's Andrew Hagemeyer. I'm a senior planner with Missoula County Community Services. And with us today is Jenny Dixon, a planner with Missoula County Community Planning Services, and Lindsay Romanello as well. And we're each going to take a little part of a presentation to kind of give everyone a big general overview of what is zoning, how do we come about this, what are some of the how is the code structured, and a little bit about the public process that's gone into this. So this is tonight's sort of a pretty major milestone for Missoula County and our work to update the Missoula County zoning code and zoning map. The current zoning code and zoning map was adopted in 1976. It's nearly 50 years old at this point. This is a long overdue endeavor, a comprehensive update to the Missoula County zoning regulations. And this is the public hearing. This is the first of our public hearings. It's a major step forward. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the hearing format for everyone. We staff met with the board chair and vice chair earlier today, and wanted to communicate clearly what the rules are of public hearings and how they work and what the format of the meeting is, so the public kind of has an understanding of what's going on. And a lot of times these meetings they're weird. They can be weird for the public. So we're going to start off with the staff presentation. Once the staff concludes with our presentation, then the planning board will open up the meeting for public comment. And they will be here tonight. We may take a break at some point about halfway through the meeting. And then if it's running real late, at 10 o'clock, the planning board may end the meeting and continue it for a future date if we haven't gotten through all the public comment at that point. But once we've gotten through all the public comment, which may be tonight, it may be on March 15th, the planning board will close the meeting for public comment. And then they will start to ask questions of staff. They will ask questions of the public and have discussions amongst themselves. Eventually, they'll direct staff to, the board will get to a point where they will make motions, whether to approve the zoning code and send it with a recommendation for approval to the county commissioners, or recommend changes, or recommend that the code not be approved. And that, just so everyone is clear, our intention tonight is to get through the open meeting portion of this format. So we expect to get through the public comments hopefully tonight. We do not expect the board to make a decision tonight. We do expect a long meeting. We expect that to happen on March 15th at the earliest. So if you're here to comment, not just to listen, we oftentimes get quite a few people just to listen in, but if you're here to comment, you'll follow the directions on how to be recognized in this virtual format. The chair posted that earlier. They'll post it again on how to participate. So whether you're listening here on Zoom, or you're watching from MCAT or on YouTube, it will tell you how to be recognized. So when you're called on, when you'll raise your hand, and when the board chair calls on you to make a comment, start off by stating your name. This is a formal procedure you are renting or entering your comment into the record, so you will need to give your name. Then give your comment. Make sure you keep it within 3 minutes. The board is going to time the comments. We've got a lot of people, and we want people to have their say. If oftentimes in these hearings, you'll get a group or a neighborhood kind of banding together to make a point, and so will be hearing the same thing over and over from a group. So it's a good idea when that's happening, instead of to restate what people have already stated, just affirm the previous comments that you agree with the previous comments related to this issue. And then also, as we go through, this is the planning board's hearing. They are running the show. So direct questions to the board, not to staff. Staff is not going to be talking unless directed to by the board. So just note that staff will be sitting here and taking notes. And so we will be recording your questions, and then we can address them to the board as appropriate. And then finally, obviously, I hope we don't need to say this, but we're going to be courteous and polite to others, including the planning board and staff and other members of the public, even if you don't agree. So with that, moving forward, that's kind of the meeting format. So we're first going to start off a little bit about zoning fundamentals. I think, this is just a necessary discussion. Zoning can be a little bit complicated and of a topic. It is a very technical thing in the planning world, and there are misconceptions around it. We obviously won't be able to address all the misconceptions or questions about zoning in general in this presentation, but we'll give a little bit of the high level stuff. So what is zoning? So first and foremost, zoning is implementation of adopted policy. Missoula County has adopted a policy around how we want to manage growth, and we are implementing that through the adoption of our zoning code. It is regulation, so it is rules on what you can and can't do on property, and it includes, both the text, which is the rules, which is the zoning code itself, and then a map, which shows where those rules apply on the landscape, because there's different zones. So it's not just one rule across the whole landscape. So that's sort of the high level thing about what zoning is. It regulates. We're going to talk a little bit more later about what specifically it regulates on property. So as I mentioned, the first and foremost, the most important thing about zoning to remember is it's an implementation of adopted policy. And the policy that we are trying to implement or proposing to implement is the 2016 Missoula County Growth Policy, which is a general countywide document. More specifically, the 2019 Missoula Area Land Use Element, which is the document that really guides growth and development and presents the county's vision for managing that in the Missoula Valley. So the statutory foundation for zoning, I'm just going to throw this out there. I don't think anyone's going to really, you can go look it up if you want to, but it's not really that big of a thing for you all, but it's Title 76 of the Montana Code annotated, specifically Chapter 2, Part 2, which is the county zoning statutes. So the way state law works in Montana is that the legislature has to enable you, the county, to zone, and they've done that, and that's where you can find those statutes. So specifically, Missoula County's current zoning code, because we are replacing the current zoning code, was adopted in 1976. So it's implementing the county's growth management policy from 1974, over almost 50 years, 48 years ago now. Obviously, Missoula is significantly different today. We have almost doubled in size. The issues that we are facing in our community, there are some similar issues, but there are also some very different issues. This zoning code is, this comprehensive update is long overdue, as the current code no longer represents the vision or values of our community. The proposed code is based off the 2019 Missoula area land use element, primarily, and somewhat the 2016 Missoula County Growth Policy. And what you see here on your screen is the land use map for the 2019 Missoula area land use element. So this is adopted policy that's on the books for the county that we are trying to implement. And as you see, it is not all of Missoula County. It is roughly an area from Bonner in the east, west to the Smurfett Stone site, north from the Rattlesnakes down to Miller Creek. So it's really this area that's most influenced by growth and development of our urban core of the city of Missoula. I probably should mention that this is a county code. This is for the area outside of the city of Missoula. It is all being done by Missoula County staff. It will be adopted by the Missoula County Commissioners. The city is a totally separate jurisdiction for planning and zoning. So the 5 components to Missoula County's growth management strategy that we're trying to implement. There's a lot more in the Missoula area land use element, but that I'm not going to get into, but these are the 5 main elements. And first of all, the first element is to coordinate on the edges. And so what we mean by coordinate on the edges is that in the areas adjacent to the city of Missoula where we have infrastructure and facilities and services in place, what we need to try to do to manage growth is to work closely with the city of Missoula. And so that means, we've worked together on the SWIP to Kane Master Plan and Form-Based Code and infrastructure planning, but we've also worked together on our growth policy, the 2019 Missoula area land use element, and they have also been involved in this project in the zoning update. Next up is to plan for the physical framework needed to facilitate unique neighborhoods. And so why Missoula County, the area that we're really looking at here, it's actually quite diverse in terms of land use. We have some very, very rural areas that are very low intensity. We also have some really urban places. And we want, the public, when we were developing the land use element, really wanted to have a unique character for these locations. Another portion is to provide for rural neighborhoods. So we are trying to facilitate some, urban growth with working with the city of Missoula to do that in a coordinated and planned manner. But there are also areas that people want to have a horse and a farm. So not all of the valley we're planning for to be just subdivisions, but some of it is also planned to be rural areas. A big element of the 5 components is to protect public health and safety. We have some very specific hazards in the Missoula Valley that we are concerned about. One is wildfire, the other is flooding. And so we are trying to steer growth away from these areas where there are high fire hazards and areas that are prone to flooding. And we're proposing to use zoning to help do that. So that's how, one of the components of the land use or the zoning map. And finally, is preserving working lands, agriculture areas, and naturally functioning systems. It's really, really important to the people in Missoula County that everything is in a subdivision, that we have farms, we have ranches, we have wildlife, we have wildlife corridors. And those are elements that you will see in the zoning code. In terms of creating the zoning map, and I apologize, I did not create a slide in time to show you the zoning map, but it's really small on the screen. So I would go to mczoningupdate.com and you can zoom all around the zoning map. I know about 24,000 people have actually looked at it. So there's a lot, I'm sure most of you have. But when we were developing the zoning map, this is sort of the thought process that we used. This isn't necessarily hierarchical, but it also kind of is hierarchical. The first and foremost, when we were looking at creating the zoning map, we would start with what the land use designation was in the Missoula area land use element, that adopted policy that we're trying to implement. That's where we would start to see what the appropriate zoning designation would be based off of that forward-thinking document. Then we'd start to look at some other things like current zoning. What the current zoning is on that property actually does, in some instances, impact what we are proposing in the zoning map. Then we moved on to other entitlements. So we do want to make sure that we're capturing proposed subdivisions that have some sort of entitlement, or I should say approved subdivisions, not proposed, but approved subdivisions that have entitlements, or other types of entitlements that have been approved at some point in the past, and recognize that those entitlements exist. Then we move on to looking at site-specific considerations, like the infrastructure that's in place or the constraints that are there. So this is where we're looking for roads, water, sewer, bus lines, transportation elements, and we're looking for fire hazards. We're looking at steep slopes. We're looking at floodplains. We're looking at channel migration zones, and factoring those things in. Then we start to look at other plans and policies. And so things like the Missoula Transportation Plan, the Mountain Line Plan, the PROS Plan. These are all adopted documents that the county has considered and does a lot of the work for where growth and where we have the infrastructure necessary to accommodate growth. And then through this process over the past year, we've also included landowner preferences. So landowners have had the opportunity to participate and suggest, hey, I want to have this zoning or that zoning, and et cetera. And then finally, the public comment that we've received over the last year has also been one of the factors that contributes to the zoning map. And these considerations will also be how we look at making changes to the zoning map, just so everyone's aware of that. Next up is code structure, and I will hand it off to Lindsay. No, yes.
Yep.
Lindsay.
Yep. That's me. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Yeah, so I'm Lindsay Romanello, and I'm gonna get us diving into the specifics and the specific outline of the code. So just a little bit of an overview here. We'll get into a bit more detail on some of the more important chapters in a sec, but here's just kind of a general layout. First of all, some of our chapters, chapters 1, 4, 10, 11, 12, and 13, these are all administrative chapters in the code. And these chapters address how the code will be administered, how we propose to measure things, for example, how we plan to enforce the code, defining the terms used in the code. We won't go into too much detail on these chapters because it's pretty dry, but those exist in all those standards exist in those chapters. Next, we have our chapter detailing the zoning districts and the general purposes, densities, and lot dimensions of each district. This is chapter 2 is where this is located. This is a pretty important chapter, and we expect a lot of folks are interested in this. I'll go into a bit more detail on this chapter in a second here. Next, we have a bunch of chapters in here describing design standards. This is a bit new for Missoula County. These chapters give basic standards of design for our built environment, and we'll talk a little bit more about these in this presentation as well. Finally, we've got also another kind of new chapter here. We will give some we've got a chapter 9, which gives some development options and incentive options for development. And incentives meaning, direction that we want development to move. For example, we give incentives to do energy efficiency, or we give incentives for agriculture, land conservations, the things that support Missoula County values. So that's kind of the general structure that we're looking at in the code and where things are located. And now we'll dive right in. Drew, would you switch to the next slide? Thanks. Great. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about chapter 2, that really interesting and exciting chapter, going into district descriptions and details. So this chapter is going to cover the general purpose of each district and some of the technical details, such as lot size, bulk and dimensional requirements, site design standards, and land uses allowed in each district. And I've got a little example of how this, of the type of information that you can find in this chapter. So I've got a little summary here, taking, for example, one of our districts. So I'm using the example of our rural residential and small agriculture district. And so first off, when you open this section, you'll find a little paragraph or two describing the district. So for the rural residential district, we've got this statement here. The purpose of this district is a balance of residential, preserving natural landscapes, agriculture. You can kind of read through this at your leisure. But you'll notice that this description and the rest of the descriptions of the code are a bit dynamic. And by that, I mean, it's not just saying this code is, or this zone is for residential, or this zone is for commercial. Instead, we are hoping to accomplish a more general blending of appropriate uses, allowing for a little more flexibility, but without sacrificing neighborhood character. So these general purpose statements are a good thing to look to for that information. Then next, you'll start getting into some more specific details as you go through this section. Density, for example, in this one, we've got 1 home per acre, height maximums 36 feet, which is about a 3-story house, lot coverage and setbacks. So this is the kind of technical information that you can find in these district chapters. And then we'll start getting into kind of at the end of the chapter 2, you'll get a list of uses and which uses are allowed in each district. So some uses allowed in this rural residential, for example, agriculture, residential, outdoor recreation, some artisan manufacturing, schools. But also something to note is that there's only one primary use for each property allowed in this district, though some special exceptions could be granted with a public review process. And this excludes agriculture, however. So where you probably couldn't, if you have a property, you probably couldn't have a big school and a house on the property, but you could have a house and your farm. So that's kind of a general layout of how the chapter 2 will work and the type of information that you can find. And now I'm going to pass it off to Jenny to go into a little bit more detail about some of our design chapters.
Thank you, Lindsay. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So Lindsay just covered chapter 2, which is really the bulk, a good portion of the bulk of this document is allocated to those zoning districts. There are 5 agricultural districts, 4 residential districts, 3 commercial districts, and 2 industrial districts. And what's going to be happening through this adoption of a new code is, while there's currently zoning on some properties in this planning area, the name and some specifics of those zoning districts are going to change. And so those of you who may be familiar with your zoning and its designation, that name may change, but a lot of the elements of that zoning district may stay the same, or the district may actually be changing based on that growth policy that Drew was talking about. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, in those districts, Chapter 3 allocates different building types that are allowed in those different districts. And this is really where we start to incorporate a philosophy of form-based code into our current zoning, which is very use-based. right, as it is written right now. The intent of the current zoning, the approach that it takes is to really separate uses that have been deemed incompatible, especially, 40, 50 years ago, whereas now those differences can be addressed through design of the landscape, the urban fabric of the area that is developing, can accommodate more of a mix of uses if it's designed properly. And so Chapter 3 talks about what building types are allowed in what districts, as well as some building elements, and I'll get to that in just a minute. But this slide shows you some examples of building types. There are a number of them for residential, including like an ADU, for example, is this, well, I don't know if you can see my cursor. There we go. Thank you, Drew. There's an ADU. And then, of course, a single dwelling, and you have a duplex up there on the upper left, all the way up to the apartment building down below it. We have, in an attempt to move in this direction of form-based code, distinguish between many more types of multi-family structures or multi-dwelling structures than we do right now. What we have right now is single dwelling, two dwelling, and apartment building. And in order to try to integrate those uses a little bit more, we have districts that allow for a triplex, a fourplex, a multiplex small, which is 5 to 8 units, a multiplex large, which is 9 to 12 units. And so you'll get to see more of a blending and a transition with those building types than you do right now. And then as far as commercial type structures, the neighborhood shop front, which is that brick building in the lower right, thank you. And then also a mixed use kind of a shop front, and then general standalone buildings. And then the one with the car, the white car on the right side, that's an example of a drive-through building. Now, these pictures are not specifically representative of exactly what this code will result in. It does give a little bit of an idea of, the kind of buildings that we expect we're going to see in Missoula with new construction. And then, of course, down in the lower portion, thank you, is kind of an example of what mini storage is, a building type, and then also more of a commercial industrial structure there that you might find on that kind of a site as well. And so certain districts will allow certain building types, but disallow others. So you are not going to, you're not going to see an ADU, for example, in an industrial district. You're not going to see a general standalone building for commercial in a residential district. So the other element of Chapter 3 is it specifies certain building design features. We call them building elements that will apply in all districts except for agricultural, and to all buildings except for agricultural, to have some design elements that will, again, accomplish that integration and softening of maybe an interface between uses that might be less compatible, that you commonly wouldn't maybe find together necessarily, and also a way to enhance the public realm so that it revitalizes our neighborhoods, our economies, and places where people want to spend some time. And those are things like the residential areas would have residential buildings higher than triplex or greater would have a requirement or a requirement for a porch or a stoop. And those are defined in our Chapter 13. It has window requirements, front-facing pedestrian access requirements, awnings, canopies, balconies, and it gives some design criteria for those types of elements to ensure that the building is designed to fit into that area, to the zone. And so let's move to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about Chapter 4. That is one of the districts that Lindsay said, in which she was explaining a little bit earlier about the different parts of the zoning code. This is one of the more administrative chapters. And actually, before we talk about Chapter 4, I just want to, a few of the other ones that we haven't even made slides for, but I want to just bring up a few things for you to think about. Those other procedural or administrative chapters, we do address how to vest certain projects that come in before the zoning is adopted, and we're dealing with that right now. Chapter 10 deals with nonconformities. That means uses that may be complied with this prior zoning, but don't comply once there's new zoning, and the rights that those uses are allowed to continue and potentially even expand. A chapter that talks about the duties of the zoning officer, the commissioners, and the BOA with respect to land use decisions. And one of the new components in that chapter that we do not have right now is called minor waivers, which allows the zoning officer to make some administrative decisions of a very minor nature when someone doesn't specifically comply with the exact an exact provision of zoning, but we can determine that there's no adverse impact on neighboring properties. Chapter 12, another administrative chapter, has enforcement, and one of the components of that that's really, I think, going to help us even actually eliminate enforcement is a new final certificate of zoning compliance, which we don't do right now. We just issue a zoning compliance permit. We send people on their way, and we don't have the staff right now or the regulations really to check through a final certificate. And we're going to be looking at that. So this Chapter 4 is another administrative chapter that really deals with how to measure setbacks, height. It also contains the exceptions to setbacks and height. And those are all in our current zoning right now, albeit maybe treated slightly differently. We've made some tweaks. We have incorporated two new concepts into this chapter. One is a build to zone, which applies in the medium density residential and neighborhood commercial, neighborhood residential districts, which means you have to bring instead of having to set your building back a certain distance, you have to bring it to within a certain distance of the front property line in order to create that public realm interface I was talking about. And the other concept is in I think 3 of those 14 districts that we have a story height requirement to that applies in like a neighborhood commercial or commercial buildings. Let's go to the next slide. So Chapter 5 contains what we call use standards, specific use standards. There's about 24 specific uses that we didn't want to just rely on the design standards of Chapter 6, which I'll cover here in just a minute. These uses needed some additional requirements in order to ensure that they are integrated into the area and generate fewer impacts as a result. Some examples that many of you may be familiar with or have heard of. We are allowing accessory dwelling units. And so with that, there will be specific requirements to those, such as sanitation approval, of course, a size limitation, and those types of things. Ag-related businesses, cannabis-related uses, which is a fairly recent one, and we will have some specific standards that just apply to that. Multi-household dwellings, tourist homes, wireless towers. As I said, there's about 24 of those. And given the nature of this hearing and the level of detail that is actually in this code, I'm not going to take the time to dive into detail on that, but I do want to let the board know, as well as anybody in the public, that should you have specific questions about these uses or others or any other section of the zoning code, we are happy to take the time to explain it in this hearing format tonight or in future meetings. Let's hit the next slide, please. So chapter 6 contains site design standards that apply universally to all uses, with caveats such as, okay, lighting is a design standard that applies in this planning area to these zoned areas, but for example, it does not apply to single or two dwelling homes. It does not apply to agricultural uses. Noise only applies in all districts, but it's only to fixed sources of noise. And these are two new sections in our county zoning that we sort of address right now, but not in any detail. And it's pretty rare to come across the situations where these would apply currently. So these are going to be looking at maintaining lighting at a level that I don't know that I would call it a dark skies ordinance, but it's trying to get lighting under control so that it doesn't impact public health or wildlife. Same with noise. We've had some examples throughout the county in the last 5 to 10 years where noise has been an issue. And so we have developed some standards for how to manage that. Landscaping and screening, parking and loading, and access and circulation are already currently in our zoning, but again, we have made changes. One of the significant changes in the parking is that we have taken out requirements for parking for commercial and industrial uses. We have reduced parking requirements in residential areas, but it doesn't mean you, there is a maximum, but you can provide as much parking now in residential areas for, let's say, a single home as you can provide at this time. But we are taking away the requirement to let's say, for example, a single home having to have 2 parking spaces off street now only has to have 1. But if someone wants to have 2, you can still have 2. Landscaping and screening really breaks down into 3 components of street frontage landscaping, parking lot landscaping, and then buffering between incompatible land uses, primarily between industrial, should they be located next to residential, would have some buffering and screening requirements. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Chapter 7 contains our new environmental standards. At the beginning, Drew was talking about the hazard areas that we are trying to protect in the county within this planning area. Our current zoning has hillside and ridgeline requirements as well as grading and drainage, but some new sections in the zoning in this proposal include riparian resource protections. Of course, the goal of that, the goal of riparian resource protection is water quality and wildlife habitat, and also to some degree flooding, because and in combination with the floodplain to protect from flood hazards. We did talk about some of the details of this with the board previously, and I guess I'll just leave it at the fact that the draft proposal includes a protection area on around a perimeter on the edge of a waterway, a stream, a river, a wetland, a stream or a river or a creek. And then in addition to that 50-foot protection area, there is a variable width buffer. And those protection areas are the more restrictive of what can't happen in there. The buffer areas are less restrictive, yet still trying to protect the resource as well as the human population. We have built into both the hillside and ridgeline requirements as well as the riparian a way to kind of use this minor waiver process that should you not be able to build at all because of these requirements, we want to make sure that that option is still available. So anyone who may have concerns that these are going to make your lots unbuildable, rest assured that that is not the intent, and that there are provisions built into this new draft to allow for development even in those scenarios. Let's hit the next slide, please, Drew. Chapter 8 is on signs, and we have sign regulations right now. The revision to the sign regulations in this draft are really focused on a court case, a decision out of Gilbert, Arizona, that requires us not to look so much at content of the sign and more at size, area, lighting of signs, and that kind of thing. So trying to make changes to this section really for compliance with federal, I think it was a Supreme Court case. So, but again, in and of itself, we could spend a lot of time just talking about signs, which again, I'm happy to answer questions, but I won't go into detail on that. There is a list of, I'm going to guess, 15 different kinds of signs that are allowed by district, and it includes the specifications for those signs. Yeah, that's it. Let's go to the next slide, please. And I think this is my last slide, or actually I have 2 slides on chapter 9. So chapter 9 is broken up into, in my mind anyway, into 2 main topics. One are what we call development options. And I have a list here of those development options, which are uses that you're allowed to do in certain districts that have additional standards that go along with them. And sometimes, and I would presume additional benefits. I mean, it's just a different type of development. So the conservation design, for example, gives someone an opportunity who may be in an, let's say, a residential district or the RRS district that Lindsay gave you the chapter 2 explanation of. And they want to, through an assignment of points, they can move their residential development to a portion of the property while preserving another portion of the property. And setting that aside permanently will let them have increased residential units in their development. Cottage courts is really kind of a multiple dwelling or a residential development around a small, there we go, cottage courts. And then mobile home park and tiny home developments are called out in this chapter that specify, what type of design of the mobile home park or tiny home development is needed in order to, those would have to, in some cases, go through, mobile home park would have to go through subdivision review. Both of those are allowed to have a certain density and have certain setbacks that might be different. And then enterprise commercial is much like the big box stores along Reserve Street. We don't see those as much anymore, but we have standards if someone should decide to do that. We have incorporated standards for the townhouse exempt development and standards for when somebody wants to do an adaptive reuse of an historic structure. And so chapter 9 contains those standards. And then last but not least in chapter 9, next slide, please, are the incentives and bonuses that Lindsay was talking about. And the incentives are, as Lindsay described it, directions that we want to see people heading in. And so these are optional. People do not have to choose these incentives when they do development, but can choose them if they want to get a bonus. And so they would have to choose one or more of the incentives, and through an assignment of points could then be awarded bonuses depending on how many points they got. And it's a pretty complex, it's kind of a complex system, and I won't take any time here to describe that beyond that. But again, happy to talk a little bit more about that if anyone has any questions. And I think I'm done with my portion.
All right, so I'm gonna take it over again real quick. So earlier, Drew went over the process, which sort of brought us to this moment. Oh, go back. Yeah, great, thanks. And the whole time that we've been working on this, gathering comment and public feedback has been a really integral part in this process, and it still is. So I just wanted to illustrate here what we've done over the past year so far to get public involvement, stakeholder involvement, and incorporate feedback. First of all, I want to mention the legal requirements that are written in state statute for public participation in county zoning. These include sending out a postcard in the mail to residents affected and those surrounding the area, and then posting a legal ad in the paper, and then posting signs around the county, kind of noticing people of the hearing. And so those are the legal requirements. That's all that we technically had to do, but we did that, and we did a ton more. So we sent out not just one mailing, but we sent out two. We sent one this summer to try and get people out to some of our events. And then we sent out another to notice about the hearing. We did a couple different press releases. You might have seen information about the zoning in the paper. We have been doing a ton of social media posts through the county. We've had paid advertising to get people noticed about this hearing. We've had a website going, and then we've been sending out a mailing list. And then we've had a bunch of events to also inform people about this process and give people the opportunity to ask questions. Most of these happened this last summer. And then we've had some informational meetings here with you guys. So that's kind of the summary of our outreach that we've done. Next slide, please. The result of all of this is we have had a ton of website traffic. I think that we've definitely, people kind of know what's going on. A lot of people, know this is happening, and they're visiting the website to gather more information. We've had a ton of website page views. And then this has resulted in hundreds of conversations with members of the public. And we've received hundreds of comments that we have, considered and incorporated into the code. And because of all of this, we have created a better code. We've created something that, people have had a say in, and something that we hope will really serve the county. And I'm going to pass it off to Drew now to kind of wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks. So as a part of this process, we do want the planning board to consider a small growth policy amendment. This is a non-content amendment. In 2021, the legislature passed a new bill, a new law, which requires counties to include population projection or projected population densities and recommended lot sizes in their growth policy in order to adopt zoning. So this occurred after we updated our growth policy and while we were creating the zoning code. So this would have been updated normally during our 5-year review process, but we are suggesting that we include a table that's that does exactly this, based off of the projected densities and lot sizes in the or the projected dwelling units per acre in the Missoula area land use element. So it's a kind of a procedural step. It does not change any content in any way. And then finally, just for the, the planning board is going to make a recommendation that gets forwarded to the county commissioners. So we do have a few motions prepared for you when it gets to that point. We won't be getting that tonight, but we will maybe getting that at the March 15th meeting. But we've got a motion for the growth policy right there prepared for you. We can amend that if the planning board wishes to do something different. And then we've got motions prepared for you for the zoning code, both for the zoning code and for the zoning map. And basically what all three of these say is that we recommend the planning board recommends approval is what they say. So we'll go into these. We can show these again once we get to that point in the process. But I just wanted to bring up that we do have recommended motions prepared. So with that, we will stop sharing and hand it back over to the board.
Outstanding. Thank you, Andrew and Jenny and Lindsay, for your presentation. Informative as always. And so planning board members, typically at this point, if any of you had any clarifying questions, we would go ahead and allow that. However, tonight, because of the anticipated time for public comment and because we want to make sure the public gets that opportunity, we're going to ask that if you have any questions for staff, Andrew or Lindsay or Jenny, that you just write those down and save them for the more than likely March 15th meeting. Again, we're anticipating a lot of time tonight being spent on public comment, and so we will put our primary focus on that. I see that Dave has his hand up, excuse me. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, sorry about this, but I am leaving on the 12th of March for the rest of the month. So I won't be here for those. And so later tonight, I would like, I don't necessarily have any questions. I want to give my consensus, a review of the plan, of the zoning plan. I mean, they've done an amazing job, but I want to put something on record if we can later tonight.
Absolutely. I think there will be an opportunity for that. Okay. And I appreciate you speaking up. And Dave, just if I get caught up in things as we go, just remind me. Okay, so great. And Dave is an outstanding source of information and in my opinion, a great person to hear comment from. So with that, we are going to go ahead and move into the public comment period of the meeting. And before I open it up to public comment, I'm going to go ahead and review how everybody can join in, watch, or listen and make comments. I'm also going to kind of review some of the format that we would like everybody to keep in mind. And then also, because we're anticipating so much public comment tonight, we've already kind of got some breaks scheduled in. So the first break is anticipated for around 7:30. That's not going to be hard and fast, but somewhere right around there, we're going to take our first break. I'm thinking that's going to be 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll come back and continue with public comment. And then if public comment goes ahead up into the 10 o'clock hour to 10 o'clock, we're going to go ahead and call public comment and ask for a continuation of that portion of this public hearing. And then on March 15th, we will resume this meeting and allow the public to come back in and continue making comments as they see fit. Again, it is really important to not only the staff, but the planning board that the public is heard to its fullest. And because of that anticipated high volume of public comment, we're trying to take every measure we can to include that. So with that, can I get the slide up for everybody to see on how you can participate and the different ways that you can watch? So if you haven't started yet, you can web stream live or on demand through MCAT. You can watch via Zoom. You can always watch on YouTube, which I almost always forget to include, or you can also watch on Spectrum Cable Channel 190. Excuse me. If for some reason you have any issues, I don't know if you can call the city clerk at this point in time. But you can try and get our attention, and we can try and help you to the best of our ability. So if you are watching but need to call in for whatever reason, if you're on MCAT or YouTube and you need to call in via phone, you can call in on your cell phone using the number 1-253-215-8782. You can also use the number 1-213-338-8477. Or you can call in using 1-267-831-0333. So there's 3 separate numbers you can call in via cell phone. And then if you are a landline user, like our household is, you can call in via 1-888-475-4499, or you can call in with 1-877-853-5257. And the webinar ID will be 842-9399-6424. Again, the webinar ID is 842-9399-6424. The password that you will be asked for is 999-636. Again, the password is 999-636. For those of you calling in by phone, you will need to press *9 to raise your hand to be recognized for public comment. And I'm pretty sure it's *9 to lower your hand as well. I'm not exactly sure about lowering your hand, but it's important to lower your hand after you made your public comment. And to mute or unmute yourself, it is *6. And just another reminder, if you are watching this via YouTube or NCAP or Spectrum or whatever, and you are calling in on your phone, please mute your television or your computer or whatever it is that you're watching, because if you do not mute that device, we will get some type of echo or feedback loop, and it kind of messes things up and we have a hard time hearing. So with that, I'm going to just kind of reiterate what Andrew said earlier. Please try and follow the directions for participating. So first and foremost, raise your hand to be recognized by me to make your comment. And also, please note that I can't see all of you on my screen. I have to scroll up and down to see your hands going up and down. So it'll take me some finagling to see everybody's hands going up and down. So please just be patient with that process. I will try and create a list and a stack of everybody who is chiming in, and I will try and get it in the order that you raise your hand to the best of my ability. Please be patient with that process because I'll be doing multiple things at once. Once you are recognized to make your comment, please state your name for the public record. You only need to state your name. You don't have to, you can tell us where you live and everything, that's not a problem, but please state your name. And then also, there is a 3-minute maximum time for your comments. I am going to be as respectful but as strict as I possibly can. And for tonight's meeting, I'm even going to use my wristwatch. I'm going to hit my timer after you introduce yourself and get rolling. And then ideally, the timer going off will be your first signal to begin wrapping it up. You should be able to hear that because I will leave myself unmuted so that you can hear that. And then if it doesn't seem like you're quite wrapping things up, I will do my best to interrupt you in the most respectful fashion possible. Again, if you are hearing very similar comments in the vein that you are also going to comment on, please just try and reaffirm that. Don't rehash it all out. Try and be as considerate as the other folks that want to make a comment tonight. The next thing is your questions should be directed as best you can to the board members. We will be the ones either trying to answer your questions or at least take them down so that we can present them to staff, the county staff later when we get into our discussion about this. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. When we get into hashing this all out with the staff. And then last but not least, and I have yet to have a problem with this, but please try and be courteous to everybody on this call and on this meeting tonight, planning board members and your fellow citizens who are calling in. So with that, I am going to check for all the hands that I have up. And right now I only have 2 hands up. And so we're going to start with, and I guess I'll say this also right now at the beginning. If you're just calling in with your phone, I cannot see your name. All I get is the prefix, which for most of us will be 406, and then the last 3 digits of your phone number. So I will just identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. And you will have to let us know what your name is, and I will try and make that note next to your last 3 digits of your phone number. So with that, I'm going to go to phone number 883 is the last 3 numbers of your phone number. You are welcome to go ahead and make your comment. Remember to unmute yourself if you are muted. And if you're on a phone, that is *6.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go right ahead.
My name is Mike Regan. Last name is Regan. And I live in Missoula, but we own a couple businesses out in the Bonner Milltown area. We own University Storage and Titan Storage. And I was just noticing on the map that the new zoning says that we are right in the commercial center or neighborhood center, I think it is. It was highlighted in red. And I guess my question is that, you know, we started this business out there about 4.5 years ago, and then we recently purchased Last Best Space and started to kind of fix that up and clean it up into Titan Storage. And we have future plans for Titan Storage to enhance the look of that even more. But I'm just kind of wondering, you know, what the future holds for us, because we are probably the largest landowner in that little corridor of the commercial center, and what that entails for us in the future. And, you know, if we're going to be allowed to continue our business, or, you know, what that looks like.
Okay, thank you, Mike, for your comment. And, you know, just to address your general question without being specific and having the maps, in all the presentations that I saw over this new zoning code, I do not get the impression that this is meant to hamper any existing businesses or try and make any like significant changes. So we can definitely have staff address your question specifically at the end here tonight, or if you want them to reach out to you individually to answer your question, I would encourage you to find Andrew or Lindsay or Jenny and ask them this question specifically, because I think they would be happy to address that.
Yeah, I think I would like to have them reach out to me individually, because I think right now, the way it looks, we don't have the infrastructure to support, you know, water or sewer or any of that. So when you talk about a commercial center, I don't know. To me, it's more of an industrial corridor. And so I don't know what the look of that. I mean, if you want dental offices or coffee shops, or what that looks like if we have the infrastructure currently to support that. I know that one option was like grocery stores, but, you know, in talking to some of the grocery stores, they don't want that because they don't have the infrastructure. So, you know, what is the future of that look like, and when are we going to get water and sewer, if ever? And so I'm just wondering if my hands are tied currently with trying to run my existing business if I can't build it out under your new regulations, I guess.
That is an absolutely fair question, Mike. And I can only imagine that they are making note of this. And the one thing that I'll encourage you to do is reach out to them. I'm not sure if they're able to like see all of your information, so they may not be able to contact you specifically from this meeting, what's being presented online. So if you could email them, I can almost guarantee you that they will reach out to you and answer your specific questions here.
And can you give me the name one more time of the person I'm meant to reach out to?
So Andrew Hagemeyer is
Okay.
one of the county staff, and I see, Andrew, you've got your hand up. Go ahead and chime in if you like.
Yeah, I'm sure this won't be the only question that we received tonight. So, you know, this is a detailed question that requires a detailed response outside of the hearing setting, probably. So, yeah, there's a number of ways you can reach us. The mczoningupdate.com website, Mike, which hopefully you've visited, it seems like you have, has a contact us option. So I would go to that directly and submit a comment, or, you know, reach out and say, hey, give us a touch base with us. And I think it has some of our, you know, like Lindsay's email is on that webpage too as well. So go to the website, you can get our contact information and drop us a line, and we will be happy to talk with you. And that goes for other people that are going to have questions as well.
Awesome. Thank you for jumping in there, Andrew. I think that helps. Does that help clarify everything there for you, Mike? Oh, well, he's already been muted. Thank you for your comment, Mike. We appreciate that. And just as a reminder, as folks move along, try and remember to lower your hand when you're done. So I've got a double up here. I've got Mike Regan, but Mike just commented. So Mike, unless that's a different Mike Regan. Yeah, okay, there we go. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate that. So that moves us to Matt Malott, and I apologize ahead of time for butchering anybody's names. Matt, I have you next in the stack, so go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment, and remember to introduce yourself for the public record.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine. Thank you, Matt.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So my name is Matt Malott. I live on just off of Oak Creek Boulevard by the Y. And wanted to just first say thank you to the county staff that's spent a lot of time and effort on the code. And I think it's a dramatic improvement over the previous zoning code, or the current zoning code rather. So thank you for all the effort that's gone into that. I know that's been a long process. The question I had for the staff more so than maybe the planning board is a lot of effort went into the 2019 land use element and to identify, you know, future use of the land all throughout the county. In particular, I was curious about there's an area just off of Deschaux Lane to the west of Deschaux Lane that is outside of the city of Missoula's urban service area. So it's about 800 acres that in the 2019 Missoula area land use element, it identified those 800 acres as planned neighborhood. And the land use element identified that 800 acres, or the planned neighborhood designation, as basically a gridded street system and a minimum of eight units per acre. And on the current zoning map, the way that it shows that 800 acres is as ag working land with, as I understand it, 1 unit per 40 acres. So given that we are in the midst of a housing crisis and that the timeline involved with developing land and places for people to live is extensive. It takes a really long time to get all the approvals and everything like that. I was curious why in the land use element, it identifies this, planned neighborhood grid system. And then in the zoning map, it shows, ag working lands, 1 unit per 40 acres. My initial guess was that it's because it's outside the urban service area from the city of Missoula sewer, but there are alternative wastewater and freshwater systems that can be implemented in there that would allow for future housing development to kind of address some of the extreme housing need in the county. So I'm not sure if anybody on the board or if somebody from the planning staff would be able to comment on that or not.
Great, thank you, Matt. Appreciate your question. So I think I'm making note of your question here, and the way things are looking at the moment, public comment is not extensive. So if that remains the case, what I think we will do is allow staff some time to come in and answer questions specifically like this. But before we, try and give staff that opportunity, we're going to try and get through some more of the public comment here, just in case that we don't have time to do that. And I don't know if I feel qualified enough to try and address your question personally, other than to say, it seems like what the county is really shooting for is to try and have as much flexibility as possible with the new zoning. And so maybe that's why you're seeing two different aspects there. But I can assure you that they are taking note of your question. And again, if it looks like there's opportunity, we will take it and have them address these questions specifically. So thank you for your comment, and we're going to go ahead and move on to the next person. And thank you, everybody. You guys are doing great. I know we're only 2 comments in, but nobody has bled over yet, which is a minor miracle. Okay, so the next person I have on my list is Ray Adden. Ray, you are next up to speak, so go ahead and unmute yourself when you are given the green light to talk, and go ahead.
Okay, so I'm Ray Aden. It won't take me long. Mine has to do with encouraging the staff to go back and review some pieces of land that are in conservation easement, which I think should not then be in the new regulations registered as either residential or residential medium, or implying that in the future this land is going to be that supposedly is in conservation in perpetuity, going to be removed from that designation. I think it just gives developers a bad concept of what they think they're going to be able to do. I have one in particular I'm thinking of, but I suspect there's more than one conservation easement in perpetuity in the county of Missoula. And I think that needs to be readdressed. So I would encourage your board to encourage the staff to re-examine some of that work. For some of them, I think that there is a zoning designation that it could easily become, and that is resource and open lands, and not something like residential medium or residential, which implies townhouses and so on supposedly conservation easement in perpetuity. And that's all so I'm just encouraging that.
Great, thank you very much for that comment, Ray. That is a good thing to notice. And actually, I would like to ask you, what specific conservation easement are you thinking of, so that I can make note of that as well?
You could take a look at the Highlands Golf Course, which is up here between, let's see, so it's boundaried by Whitaker, Ben Hogan, Highland Park, and Crestline. So it is a golf course, but it's been in conservation easement in perpetuity since 1978. And presently, the zoning overlay, or the zone for the area proposed, is residential medium. And that doesn't make any sense to me.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Who was the third speaker? Okay.
So let's see. Just taking a couple of notes here, folks. So that brings us to our next person that I have on the list, and I apologize. I don't necessarily have your name specifically. What I am showing here is J, capital J, Lee, BNM. Not sure what that represents of your name, but you're next on the list, and go ahead and unmute yourself when you get the green light there, and give us your name, please.
Hi, my name is Jessie Martin, and I'm just wondering, we've got a 10-acre parcel out of Harper's Bridge Road in that area where all the rest of the housing, like the houses that are either 1 or 5 acre parcels, and our current land is now in this new zoning. It's going to be in the is it the ag reserve, where it's the minimum property size is 40 acres. And I'm just not sure how that would affect a 10-acre parcel that's not in a 40-acre piece. Does that mean there's only one home in that 10 acres? And can that be changed to the same as the rest of the subdivision that's around us?
Okay, that is a very fair question, Jesse. Again, just to make sure that you know, staff is writing down and noting all of these questions that are coming forward. However, we're not going to answer them specifically at this time. But again, at the moment, I'm not seeing an enormous amount of people, so we may very well have time here later in this evening to address some of these specific questions. So I'm making note of your question here, and we will try and address that as best we can before the close of the meeting tonight.
Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. And thank you very much for taking the time to make a comment and participate tonight. Okay, so next on my list, I have Gary Matson. Gary, go ahead and once you get the talking permitted signal there, go ahead and unmute yourself and please make your comment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, took me a while to find the button. So members of the planning board, thank you so much for this opportunity to comment. My name is Gary Matson, and I live in West Riverside, out in the Bonner Milltown area. And my comments have to do with Missoula County Draft Zoning Code of January 14th, and having to do with Chapter 5, the use standards and conditions. I just like to comment on section 5.10, cryptocurrency mining, which I strongly support. Wanted to express strong support for that provision, and stating that the only way that this kind of mining is permitted is if the operators provide their own new renewable electricity And the renewable portion needs to be defined, however, to mean solar and wind generation and electrical storage facilities. And my second section would be in section 5, having to do with storage units, and they're missing from the list, and I think they should be included. And with all due respect to the person who commented first tonight, I live not too far from the storage units. We have an abundance of them in our neighborhood, and I actually think they are better located in industrial areas than in community neighborhoods. They've done a fine job with the one they've got there, but that land is taken away from other community uses. I think they'd be better off in industrial locations, and further that that perhaps the code could specify some number of these that is appropriate for the county, so that we have less of a proliferation of them all over the county. My next section is section 9.5, having to do with mobile home park developments, standards and criteria. And in the density is specified to be 20 mobile homes per acre, which seems to be really too great a number in that small area. And I think that like a number of 10 per acre is more appropriate, providing those residents with a quality place to live, recognizing that it would be more expensive, and perhaps developers would not be willing to sacrifice a profit that would occur if they built them at a greater density. But there may be ways around that. Perhaps the county could even own a mobile home park and rent it without a need to make a great profit. And again, on standards and criteria for mobile home parks, the energy efficiency criterion should be added. It's missing. Mobile homes need to be provided with energy efficient space heating and be well insulated. I think these standards should be put into the zoning code. And the reason being that it would be helpful to Missoula County to help it meet its 100% clean electricity goal. And that would be important as we're going forward. So I think that pretty much all that I have to comment on. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Gary. We appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening and make your comment. All fine points, I think. Okay, so we're going to take one more comment, and then we're going to go ahead and proceed into a break here. So the next person that I have on my list is Diane Stensland Bickers is what I'm showing on here. So Diane, when you get the permitted to talk, go ahead and unmute yourself, and please give us your name and make your comment. You're still muted there, Diane.
There we go. Finally. You said my name right. I'm so impressed. My name is Diane Stensland Bickers. I just wanted to give a shout out to Andrew and Jenny and their team for the hours and days and months and years of work they put in onto this code. I just wish the whole valley was going under the same code at the same time. But I wanted to make sure somebody said thank you to them for all their hard work. That's all. Bye.
Great. Thank you, Diane. And I'm really glad that I can get somebody's name right. Sometimes I butcher them. Okay, folks. So we do have some other public comment that want to be heard. However, right at this moment, we're going to go ahead, and I think we're just going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break so that staff and board members who may not be at home can take a minute and use the bathroom, grab a snack, get some water, whatever that may need to be happening. So I have got, I'm going to say 7:35, and that will bring us back at 7:50. So we'll just take a few minutes and we'll reconvene at 7:50. Is that right? 7:35, 40, 50. Yeah, 7:50, folks. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are just about to the 7:50 marker there. Give folks a few more seconds to get back to whatever device or phone they're watching or listening on, and give board members a last few seconds to get back in place. But we are just about to recommence this meeting. We are currently in the public comment period of the planning board's meeting for tonight. And I will resume that here currently. And just a reminder for folks calling in on cell phones or landlines, it's *9 to mute and unmute yourself, and *6. Oh wait, is it *9? Excuse me, *9 to raise your hand. Let me double check. *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute and unmute yourself. And with that, we are going to conclude our break and resume the public comment portion of this meeting. So if you are interested in making a comment, please go ahead and raise your hand, and I will try and mark those down as they come in. And then I will call on you in the order that I see them come in. And so next on my list, I don't have your full name. I have J Line, and maybe that's just your handle or something. So just go ahead and unmute yourself and give us your name for the public record and make your comment, please. And again, everybody has 3 minutes.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Tim Line. J Line is my wife, Julie. And I first want to say thank you to the planning board for your time tonight. And I want to say thank you to the planning staff for all their work on the code. So we have the Line Ranch up on Whitaker Drive across from the Keep Restaurant. And so one of my comments I think is not unique to us. My comment is that, and I suspect there are other landowners who have existing uses, and the proposed zoning code changes would, at least in our example, impose zoning restrictions that are inconsistent with existing uses. So for example, we operate the Line Ranch as a working cattle ranch, and I think arguably fall within the definition of high intensity agriculture. And yet we, in the proposed drafts, we are proposed to be zoned as a residential area. And in the residential district, high intensity agriculture is prohibited. And so I also recognize in Chapter 10, legal non-conforming uses would be allowed to continue. But that chapter also says, so it says it is the intent of these regulations to allow nonconformities to continue until they are removed, but not to encourage their survival. And so my concern is if we are then zoned in a residential district, our agricultural uses as they taper off would be prohibited from re-engaging or enlarging. So for example, the regulations talk about a structure. If the structure is damaged by more than 50% of its value, we would not be able to rebuild it. And so we have barns, hay barns and such, and if they collapse under a snow load, if it's damaged to more than 50% of the value of the structure, we would not be allowed to rebuild that structure. Anyway, so in general, my comment is in our situation, and I think other landowners maybe have similar situations, we would want to be zoned in a district that's consistent with our existing use so that we are not hampered in the future. And we had already reached out to Lindsay, and she has been very helpful and responsive, and she offered to meet with us. And so we will take up her offer and meet with her, but I just wanted to make that comment publicly. I do have a specific comment. In the definitions, there's a defined term that's called agricultural buildings. And I searched throughout the draft zoning code and I could not find that term used anywhere in the zoning code. And so that's a specific question. Maybe Lindsay can help answer. Why is there a definition of a phrase that's apparently not used in the code? But anyway, that's our general comment, is we would prefer not to be zoned as a residential district since we are a working cattle ranch. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you, Tim, for your comment. I personally appreciate that because I am a farmer as well, and I think that's a really pointed thing to make, and I'm sure that staff will address it. However, I'm gonna also make a point to try and follow up on that because I think that's an important distinction to make. Because, in my opinion, we need to hold on to all the agricultural land and specifically small ranches as we can.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome, and thank you for taking the time to join us tonight and make a comment. Okay, so that brings us next to a phone number. So again, if you're calling in via phone, I can only see your number. And so I will read off the last 3 digits of your phone number, and then you can, when you get opened up to talk, you can unmute yourself, and please give us your name for the record and for me to write down so that I can address you correctly. So the next person on the list I have is ending in the numbers 305, prefix 406 305.
Hi, everyone. My name is Matt Taylor, Missoula city resident, and I want to thank the planning board for all of the extensive and tireless work that you all put into this process. I know this can often be a contentious and a tedious process for planning board members that you commit a lot of your life to, so thank you for that time. It's interesting, my comments would come right after the ones just before me because I live in the Upper Hillview Way area, and so I'd like to provide a comment on the proposed zoning areas south of Garrett, south of Longview, and south and east of the Upper Hillview Way area, which is in the proximity of the Line, Hayden, and Rymel ranches. My recommendation is that the current proposed zoning is for these to be rural residential small agriculture 1, so one dwelling unit per acre would be allowed, and instead to have this changed to AGW 40 or 80. And my reasons for this comment are that one dwelling per acre, first of all, does not address the housing shortages and the affordable and mid-range price housing needs that the Missoula City and Missoula County area is experiencing. What would result in such a change would be, if it was deemed as RRS1, which I don't agree with, it would be more high-end homes that, while they may contribute to the city property tax base, would be counter to the existing and historical uses of the area, as the previous commenter, owner of the Line Ranch, just noted. In addition, converting it to RRS1 would severely degrade the view shed, which is so treasured by all Missoula County residents. This is an area that is highly visible to anybody in the city and county corridor. And it would also have severe adverse impacts on wildlife corridors, including into the Moose Can Gully area. And it would be counter to the trends of numerous highly supported voter initiatives to protect open space and view sheds. I think of ones, obviously, that have occurred on Mount Jumbo and over in the Clay Flats area. Also, it would put more homes in the urban wildland interface susceptible to wildland fire hazards. So for this reason, I would strongly urge the planning board to reconsider their proposal and instead shift those areas that I'm referring to AGW 40 or AGW 80. Thank you so much for your time.
Great, and thank you, Matt. Definitely appreciate you taking the time to sit with us tonight and take the time to comment. Also appreciate your recognition of the time that the planning board puts in on these things. I'm not sure how many people realize that we all volunteer our time to do this. So definitely appreciate you recognizing that. And just to let you know, we will, again, folks, we will try and make sure that staff addresses your questions and comments. If not tonight, then at the next meeting on March 15th. Okay, so the next person I have on my stack is again a phone number. And this individual, the prefix is 770 and the last 3 is 252. So go ahead and unmute yourself and give us your name for the record and go ahead and make your comment, please.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Lemberg and I live in Missoula County, and I've been at a lot of these meetings before, so I know Andrew and Jeannie, and I know how hard they worked on all of this, so I do appreciate that. My comment is that I had seen that Andrew said that we're reviewed for our housing needs like every 5 years, and I appreciate that because the buzzword of the day with the developers always seems to be extreme housing crisis, and I would hope that we won't be in what's considered extreme housing crisis for forever. And I would like to know that there was some way to address that when maybe we catch up and we don't need to be building as frequently as we are, or as dense as we are. And maybe we can, save some of the mountains, like the previous caller was saying about the view space and the wildlife corridors, and holding on to our agricultural land and trying to preserve some of what makes Missoula County special, instead of just reacting and potentially overreacting to a buzzword of extreme housing crisis. I really would hate that we overbuild, and that's just, so I was wondering with that, with our reevaluation of the housing needs that supposedly happens every 5 years, what exactly does that entail? And would that be sufficient enough to, is every 5 years enough, or do we need to go look at it every couple of years? Because there's a real danger right now in overbuilding. And that's my comment.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Definitely appreciate you making your comment. And I think I will try and make a little clarification for you here as far as Andrew's comment about the five-year review was, if I'm not mistaken, actually about the growth policy for the county's growth policy that they established. I'm forgetting the year that it was established, but that goes through a 5-year review every 5 years. And so if there's updates that need to be made, like most recently, the 2021 legislature passed a law asking for population density, that would be included in a 5-year review. However, I think I can also address some of your comment and just letting you know that building and the need for housing and the need to build smart is on everybody's mind. I think not only on the planning board, but definitely with the county commissioners, and I think also with the city council and mayor. At least I hope. I don't quite get to follow the city council and mayor as close as I'd like, but I definitely agree with what you were saying, and appreciate you taking the time to make your comments. Okay, so that brings us to our next individual, and I have Heather Mcmillan as the next person to make a comment. So go ahead and unmute yourself, Heather, when you get the opportunity to speak, and go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you, Sean. I appreciate that. My name is Heather Mcmillan, and I am the Project Development Director for Homeward in Missoula, nonprofit, and we live and breathe all things housing. I had the luck to be able to help Jenny, Andrew, and Lindsay work very hard over the last 4 and 5 years of land use planning to zoning rewrite. And this particular zoning, these recommendations couldn't come at a better time. We had housing issues before, but now that everybody knows what a wonderful, where we live is a wonderful place and the perception of it being safer, we've compounded our housing prices. I want to say that I support this zoning update, and it will need some tweaking, of course, with the comments have all been very valid from all the individuals on this that have testified so far. But in the process of evaluation, we worked really hard to think about how to help with the housing issue, but also equally important is open space. And so the open space bond, all the conservation easements matter, where our ag land goes matters. And we had to look at it holistically. And I believe strongly that the housing types that are proposed in this rezone are replacing what I would qualify as archaic zoning from the 70s, where we only had a couple of different choices. And while density may be difficult, it's also a way to build homes that aren't 1 per acre. And that's what we're looking for. We teach first-time homebuyer education classes. We build the housing, and it is impossible to find anything on the market for actual Missoulians and Montanans. And so this zoning rewrite, which takes years to come to fruition, couldn't come at a better time. And it sets us up for success to plan our growth and manage our growth, and to be able to keep open space along with trying to address our housing issues. So I really applaud Lindsay, Jenny, and Andrew, because this is not a simple process, but this is a very thorough and appropriate and couldn't be better timed adjustment to our county zoning. So thank you. I appreciate all the work that you guys have done, and there's a lot of work still to go. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, and my apologies for messing up your last name there a little bit. All right. Appreciate that comment there, Heather. And so that brings us next to Jay Barlow. So Jay, when you get permitted to talk there, go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment, please.
Good evening. My name is Jay Barlow. First, thank you all for your efforts on this document and meeting. Second, I'd like to reaffirm the comment from a fellow resident this evening about the representation of lands that are under conservation easements. I thought that was a very good suggestion for improving that representation. And third, I would like to encourage further consideration of climate change mitigation in this document. I appreciate the provisions in here already about energy efficiency and renewable energy. I think this is an opportunity to go further. We know that we must bring our greenhouse gas emissions down to 0 by 2050, and the key to reaching those long-term goals is to have near-term targets and goals. So I have 2 in mind with development. The first would be that new buildings in Missoula County be 0 carbon ready by 2030. And second, that in order to support that, we look at restricting new development of natural gas infrastructure or natural gas appliances as soon as possible to support that. So insofar as these or other climate change mitigation considerations could be reflected in this document, I would encourage that. Thank you for your efforts.
And thank you, Jay. Definitely appreciate your comments. I think those are both pointed and accurate for today's day and age. So, interestingly enough, I don't have any more hands raised at the moment. So we'll take just a minute here for me to catch up with some of my notes and see if anybody else raises their hand. I see that Andrew Hagemeyer raised up his hand, so we'll let Andrew go ahead. And what do you got there, Andrew?
Sean, I can't remember. So excuse me if I'm jumping out of turn here, but do we also check to see if there's people calling in over the phone and put up that number thing and or is it just people in our list? Are you seeing that list of people calling in? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure everyone's getting a chance. So I don't see what you see, so I'm just curious.
I do believe that I'm seeing or that I get everybody that calls in. And I guess I was going to suggest that we take a minute and double check with staff and make sure that we're not missing anything. But I do believe that if they call in via their cell phone, it does come up on my list.
Okay, maybe Donna could clarify just in case.
Yes, they are coming through. That's when Sean was reading out the phone numbers that end in like 305, 252. Those are all people who have called in.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you very much.
And so kind of what I was thinking here, Andrew, was that maybe we could take, and you can let me know what you guys want to do, but we got a little lull in the raised hands here. Maybe we could take some time to address some of these specific questions, if that makes sense and feels okay for you guys. And then maybe that will give community members another opportunity to think about questions they might have. And then also maybe address some of these more specific questions that we've received.
Well, point of order, wouldn't we close public testimony when there are no hands up?
I think normally, Rick, we would definitely do that. However, we were anticipating a lot of public comment tonight. So I was just kind of trying to find a way to leave things open for a while and give people that opportunity, because we really don't want to close the public comment period before we give everyone a chance to chime in.
I do agree. It's kind of odd, but I think it's a testament to what a great job that they've done with public meetings and getting this out to everyone. And I'm surprised. I'm as surprised as you are that there aren't more hands. So.
Absolutely. And I would second that. I think if this ends up being our, the extent of our public comment for this hearing, that is an absolute testament to the work done by Andrew and Lindsay and Jenny and just the county staff on, like letting the public know as to the best of their ability what was happening. So I mean, I don't know if it's really procedurally out of bounds, or Andrew, what are your thoughts on my idea? Or I mean, we could take another break.
We can have we don't have to close the public hearing. But so what we can do is stop taking public comment for the time being, have a little board discussion, have a little staff discussion. And then either we run out of time for the night, and then the hearing we'll open the hearing back up on March 15th. Or if we don't run out of time tonight, we can open it up again and take additional comment if that's what you want to do. We're pretty flexible.
Would you need a motion, Andrew? Sorry, this is Rick again. Don't mean to be interrupting, but would you need a motion to close public comment for tonight only?
That's a great question that I don't know for sure either. I don't know if Donna or Jenny or even Karen Hughes is our assistant director is on the call and wants to jump in. I mean, we don't even have to close it for tonight. We can just have a little board. We can have a little bit of like put it on pause, do board discussion, and open it back up. Or we could, I mean, we are going to continue the hearing to March 15th. I don't think I forgot. I know I forgot to mention this earlier, but we've received nearly, you know, we were estimating between 80 and 100 written comments. So we have gotten significant comment on the proposal. But we really emphasize people sending stuff in writing, and the board has received, for the public that's interested, the board has received all of that comment, and they will be reading it all, and they will be considering it all in their decision. But that's part of the reason why we're waiting 2 weeks to make the decision. So whatever you want to do, we're pretty flexible. If Karen or Jenny or Donna want to step in with some procedural, if they know better, now would be a great time to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's address the procedural element of this, and then I do see a hand up again from Matt Taylor, who looks like he would like to make another comment. So let's address the procedural aspect of this, and then we'll go to oh, now I'm seeing two hands up. So let's go ahead and do the procedural aspect, and then we'll do the questions or comments, excuse me. Or maybe not.
I don't, sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't believe that you're obligated to close public comment. I think that it's at your discretion to just stop taking public comment for a period of time during this meeting to ask questions and interact with staff, and then continue to take public hearing or public testimony through the end of the meeting tonight and into the 15th if you want to go for another meeting. But I would keep the public testimony portion open until the end of when you feel like you're ready for board discussion, if we even get to that point.
Okay, great. That seems good. Donna or sorry, Karen, do you guys have anything to add, or should we go ahead and move back to comments from the public?
Yeah, no, I would follow. Jenny has great advice for you.
Great. All right, thank you, Karen. Okay, so I've got two hands up here, and Matt Taylor, phone number ending in 305. You were the first individual to re-raise your hand. So Matt, go ahead and make your comment. You should already be permitted to talk, so go ahead.
Thanks so much for the opportunity to provide additional comment. Again, my name is Matt Taylor, and I live in the Upper Hillview Way area. Just sort of as an aside, I have to say it's quite nice to be in a zoning meeting, public meeting that is rather civil. I've sat in some ones, for example, down in the Bitterroot Valley, where it was anything but civil. So this is a testament to you all, and appreciate the nature of the other public comments that have come in. I also want to echo some comments that were made much earlier in the evening by Ray Atten regarding careful consideration needs to be made to lands that are in conservation easement. And I speak again about the lands near the upper end of Hillview Way on the line, Hayden and Rymel ranches, which I believe some are in a conservation easement. And it's a question, I guess, to the board, if you can address this later, which is, yeah, again, first of all, I think that these lands should instead be in agricultural working 80 or at a minimum 40. But if a land is in a conservation easement, I mean, would that not prohibit, subdividing it down to one house per acre as is currently in the proposed zoning, or somehow can a future purchaser of such lands buy out the easement options through, paying back taxes or something like that? It's a question to the board, but again, I think most importantly, the intent and the spirit of the working lands as they have been, and the efforts of landowners who have put their lands into conservation easements need to be honored in the rezoning here, and that would apply to the lands that I'm commenting about. Again, thank you so much for all the time, volunteer time that the board is putting in. I can't commend you enough.
Awesome. Thanks again, Matt, for your comment. And I agree wholeheartedly with you with the civility of this evening's discussion. So that'll bring us next to Fred Stewart is the person I have next on my list. So Fred, as soon as you get the green light, go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment.
Okay, I'm trying to unmute it. My comment is that I live in the Targa Range area, and Andrew and his staff have spent quite a lot of time working with us to get the zoning that we proposed more than 10 years ago finally put into place. And his concept of an overlay to incorporate the zoning was a good move. And I want to support entirely enthusiastically the fact that we're finally going to get our zoning that's connected to the neighborhood plan. So thanks for all their effort. I appreciate it.
Outstanding. Thank you, Fred, for your comment and your appreciation of their hard work to include the target range neighborhood plan. I know that's important to everybody out there. So once again, interestingly enough, I am not seeing any more raised hands. So I think what I would like to do at this point in time is go ahead and pause the public comment period. However, if you raise your hand, I will see that and I will make note of it, and I will make sure you get an opportunity to make your comment. And with that pause on public comment, go ahead and invite the board. If any of you have any comments or questions or would like to address some of what has been brought up here by the public, feel free to do that. And we'll just get a little discussion going here. And just to be clear, so what I'm thinking is that we will go through this portion and keep the public comment period open. And if we get to a stage where we are just kind of wrapped up with this portion, we will go ahead and do our continuation to the March 15th meeting. And that way we are providing more than ample opportunity for the public to chime in. And so that when we begin on March 15th, we will commence with preliminaries and then allow public to comment if they would like at that time. And then once we are finished with that, we can really just launch into the meat of our approval of their recommendations. So unless anybody has any strong, like reservations about that plan, you can let me know during our discussion. So let's see, I had Dave and then Shane and then Rick. So go ahead, Dave, with your comments.
Okay, thank you. So I'm gonna go backwards from the specific to the general, if I might, and responding to the comments from the public comments are really good ones. I agree. The two questions that I'd like the planning board and staff to work on together is a question number one about conservation easements. My understanding, conservation easements can be in perpetuity. They can also have time limits. And if the time limits are up and if the owner decides to move forward, then maybe they can work with a county staff about changing from the ag use. Otherwise, if there are already conservation easements on there, I think the county may be in error in putting the land use up that's inconsistent with the conservation easements. And I know that staff and the landowners probably can work that out for the commission. The second point has to do with ag land again. I'm real familiar with Rymel and the Line Ranch and all those folks there. And it seems unusual for me, for the county to projecting that as residential in a very difficult to build residential context when the landowners want to stay agriculture. Their time may come in the future when they want to do residential. I think the county should concentrate in developable areas which are already identified in the land use plan elsewhere, not on the high hillsides and not in ag use. That's where the county should continue to. The rest of the county plan, I think, has identified lots and lots of potentially developable areas. I think you, county staff, hopefully you can work it out with the landowners up there on the steep hills about finding appropriate agricultural zoning district. Those 2 points are brought up by the public. I just had to talk to. But since I'm not going to be here on the 15th, I hope you'll indulge me for a couple minutes here.
Absolutely.
First, it's an amazing job. I know I've been there and done that, and the staff and consultants and have done an amazing job of sorting out a really difficult puzzle here and putting it all together. My comments usually start out about focusing on the organization and ease of use. And you know, when I got this and finally a print document, because that's how I look at things in printed documents, it's really difficult to scroll back and forth and to find what you want, well over 300 pages worth anyway. I did read every single page and it was worth it. And I've read every single comment, and the public was in there with lots and lots of interesting things. And I know staff has been working on those issues, but I just want to say that I think any person that wishes to build and develop property should be able to follow this document step by step. You can do this, you can do that. Here's the rule this, here's the rule that. It's not, what do you think about kinds of things? I think it's a formula. It's set out. It's easy to follow, that developers, if they don't know how to follow it, they will find out how to follow it real soon. And congratulations to the county and the county staff and the folks that put this together. I want to emphasize in the document itself, what I like the most is a limited number of districts. The definition chapter is, chapter 13 is precise and lengthy, but you need that. Administration chapter, the major one, chapter 11, is really well done. The use of site and design standards is a big step in a direction for the county to help people who want to build visualize how to make it happen. That's a great job to help them get where they want to go. And this is how you visualize it. I really also like the options and incentives and a method that's being tried out, I think can be successful by using new techniques in order to maybe increase density in some cases or do other things that are not tightly controlled by maybe the rule itself. And of course, the illustrations and examples. Good on you. It was a really excellent job overall. I was actually surprised. I know it was overwhelming to me at first, you know, to spend a few hours, well, maybe one or few, but once you get it all into you, it's logical and it really flows nicely. And I just want to put that out here to the other planning board members and especially the staff about a job well done. I'm saying all this because I won't be here in 2 more weeks, but I could, in fact, even made my own findings, and it follows right along what the county happened to do. I made this before I saw the presentation tonight about community identity and neighborhood character and retail rural character and existing infrastructure and how to tie that in with the city work and avoiding hazards. And it's ironic. So I think the county did an excellent job. The little details, yeah, these things happen, work it out. I'm counting on staff to work it out with the folks who have the key issues involved here. Otherwise, I think in 2 weeks, you guys have a clear path, in my personal opinion. I would vote for it if I was here. Thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you, Dave. I always appreciate your comments. Let's see, I had Shane and then Rick.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, you know, it's hard to follow Dave. I mean, that was just really well said. So appreciate that. And I think it does speak to, the really good work done by staff on this in presenting that the comments are specific in a lot of ways and addressable, that as Dave just pointed out, and I guess lacking any big picture things that I wanted to discuss, I thought that we might just dive into some of the specific questions and ask staff if they could maybe address a few of them. I guess for Andrew, Jenny, and Lindsay, I was curious about this out by the Y. I think it was off of Deshaw Lane. There was the question about the 2019 land use element maybe not quite matching the zoning, and wondered if you could maybe speak to if there was something specific about that, because our understanding of this is that we're trying to get those things to align as best as possible, and just wondering if there was some extenuating circumstances there, or if there's just a misread, or if you could maybe just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, of course. And this was Matt Malot's question, and he was on my people to call this week after the hearing list. So I plan to reach out to you, Matt, and talk to you about this more. But yeah, so the land use element, the map and the land use element is a desired future condition. And the zoning is more of a reflection. So it's where we want to grow in the future. And the zoning is more of a reflection of where we can grow today. And the planned neighborhood land use designation in the 2019 Missoula area land use element, which calls for it's calling for urban densities, 8 dwelling units per acre, predominantly residential, but some mix of uses. I mean, what we're talking about is creating neighborhoods out by the Y in the future. If you look closely at that land use designation, what it's talking about is the lack of infrastructure that's in place today. There is not sewer and water available to those areas today. Oftentimes the roads that are to the planned neighborhood areas are not available today. So what it calls for is a very low density until we get the infrastructure to support that level of development. And then the rezoning can be triggered to the higher density, to something like neighborhood residential. So it anticipates that in either two ways. The county does some sort of infrastructure planning that creates a path forward to provide infrastructure to those planned neighborhood areas, or a private landowner comes forward with a plan and says, you know what, I actually can get the water and sewer here from whatever technology they take advantage of. And then that would trigger a rezoning. So the idea is we're zoning at really low density today because that infrastructure is not there. And we do not, under any circumstances, want it to develop at 1 unit per acre, 1 unit per 5 acres, 1 unit per 10 acres, because we would lose that basic resource of potential housing supply in the future in perpetuity if we developed at lower densities. Those types of lower densities, 1 unit per acres, 1 to 5, 1 to 10s. Those are really hard to redevelop to higher intensities in the future. It's possible, but it's really difficult. So this is a really common practice in the urban planning world. They do it in places like Kansas and Missouri, and they do it in places like Florida. They do it all over the country where they expect to grow in the future, but do not have the infrastructure to support it today to zone it for very low densities. So it stays like a reserve in a way. Now, the county this is at the very early stages. We haven't released an RFP, but we will be doing it very soon to do an infrastructure plan for the Y, to figure out how we're going to extend water and how we're going to extend sewer and what our collector road network needs to look like. And when we do that, according to that infrastructure plan, we might be coming back to the planning board and proactively rezoning those areas as appropriate up to the higher densities. So that's the relationship with that area, and that's the land use map. So it actually fits what the land use map is intending very well.
I just ask a quick follow-up question that maybe dovetails with this and also kind of maybe touches on another comment. But so I know that we've talked about this. I maybe just want to ask it again. In terms of like zoning code updates and things like that, what's the projected timeline and what's the timeline for updates? I guess what I'm getting at is there was the comment from Stephanie about, we don't want to overreact right now. We don't want to set ourselves on a course to, create so much housing stock that we regret it in the future. So like, how often are we thinking about, updating this to reflect current thinking? Because I think it maybe ties in with both questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are going to do maintenance updates on a yearly basis. So like, Dave just kind of alluded to it, that not everything's going to be perfect. There are going to be things in this code that aren't going to quite work out the way we're intending to do. And we're going to find like loopholes, and we're going to find things that are roadblocks. And so every year we're going to try to do a maintenance update on the code. And these are going to be small things. But Stephanie wasn't off base in referring to the 5-year reset or review, I should say. So every 5 years, we will go and review our growth policy and look at the current conditions and see if we need to make any changes to our growth policy. And if we find that we are going down the wrong path in land use in some way, that growth policy might recommend then major updates to the zoning code and changes to the zoning code. And so then we would perform those updates and make those changes. So it does. Zoning is not supposed to be in place in perpetuity forever. It is supposed to evolve with the community, and it's likely in 20 years we're going to be redoing this whole thing again. We should be really considering it on about a 20-year basis. Like, do we need to do a comprehensive overhaul of our zoning code? And about every 5 years, do we need to make major tweaks? And the growth policy, like I said at the beginning, zoning is the implementation of policy. So each time we'll start with the policy aspect and be doing that portion and then moving towards the implementation.
Great. Thanks, Andrew.
All right, great. Go ahead, Rick.
Hi. I don't want to be too repetitive and echo too much of what Dave said, but I want to say that it's refreshing to be in an area where you've got ranchers that want to not have their property developed. When I came from an area where ranchers wanted to build a subdivision on their very valuable ag land that produced amazing amount of revenue. So I guess, echoing that, we had two people say, why is it RRSA 1 instead of AGW 40 or 80? And I want to hear the answer to that, because it seems to, the way it was explained by the people that testified, it seems to discourage that legacy of passing down ag land or farm or ranch land from generation to generation. And it seems to be wanting to sort of phase that land out into higher density land. And I don't understand that reasoning, if it is that way. So I'm kind of anxious to hear that. And that's my only comment.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Anybody on staff want to take that on?
Yeah, I was going to say, do you want us to address this now? And I'm happy to. So let's go back to the land use map slide. I'm not going to bring it back up, but if you remember, it had all these considerations, sort of a high, you know what I'm trying to say, process. Like, we prioritize certain things. So the first thing we do is we look at the land use element in the land use map. So that's a future projection of where growth is going to occur. And then we move on to entitlements. And then we move on to infrastructure and site constraints. So when you look at that area on that south side of town, the land use element is calling for a mixture of some pretty like residential type intensities, some lower, still sort of residential types intensities, and then some pretty low density types intensities. Then when you look at the existing zoning, and this is the main factor up there, is the existing zoning is for 1 unit per acre. So they have existing entitlements today. That ranch has existing entitlements. So when we were looking at this, and this is why we do the public process to narrow things down, and you're going to see where I'm going here. When we were doing the map, we see those existing entitlements, and they're consistent with the land use element, the fact that the city's growth policy, the fact that there's water and sewer at the line ranch's door. They're just down the street from a bus line. They're on a road, collector road, that is not congested, does not need infrastructure improvements according to the MPO. You look at all those factors and it's like, okay, well, we're going to keep these residential zoning designations up here. So we're not going to we don't want to eliminate these entitlements because, they have entitlements. However, when we go through this process and the line ranch owners step up and say, hey, we don't want this residential zoning. We want to be zoned for ag working lands as a ranch. Heck yeah, we can accommodate that when the landowner wants to do that. That's an easy thing to do. But that gives you an idea of, I mean, we've sent out postcards to everyone twice to get them, and it worked. Like we got to these folks and they knew to come and participate. So the system's working. Obviously when we're drafting the land use map or the zoning map, we can't talk to every single person. We have to kind of do that after it's drafted. So we didn't know that that was their plan. We were trying to protect their existing entitlements that they have on their property. And so we've been talking with them, and we plan to continue to talk with them, but the staff would be supportive of a agricultural working lands designation on their property if that's what they were interested in.
That's what hearings are for.
I also wanted to jump in real quick with a clarification. And this might be an issue that we need to look at in our definitions of agriculture. But just to clarify, there was also a concern that the ranch that they have going on their property would not be allowed with the residential designation. And the way that we would interpret their operation would be low intensity agriculture. We consider high intensity agriculture a lot more of a more almost industrial type use. So that's something that we may need to rework in our definitions. Just to clarify that low intensity agriculture is allowed in residential districts.
Great, thanks, Lindsay, for that clarification. And I just want, before I get to your hand, Josh, I see you got your hand up there. Andrew, I kind of want to, as an agricultural producer, I want to clarify what you're saying there. So you're saying the line ranch, with the new zoning update, the responsibility kind of falls to them to come to the county to request a different zoning to create what it is they see for themselves in the future. Is that what it is that you're saying there?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it that way. We do everything we can. And I mean, we've been engaging the public on this for 5 years. So we do everything we can through the planning process to engage the public and try to figure this out ahead of time, but we don't always do. And I would say there was a lot of examples that we could point out there that we have figured this out ahead of time, that we're not talking about it right now because we already figured it out, but we don't catch everyone. And so, it is the responsibility of the public to be involved, and that's not always the case. They aren't involved. The line family has taken that choice, and they've chosen to be involved, and they suggested something different than what we've, proposed. And that's great. We're happy to accommodate that, but there's not every situation we necessarily can, but they have, we always want to try to first step, preserve those entitlements, preserve those property rights that they have. That's always the first thing we think about. And then if they're saying, oh no, that's not the best thing for our property rights, then we're really willing to listen, especially when it comes to things like agriculture, because I can't, I think everyone on the board knows this, but maybe not everyone in the public. Like this is right up there with housing in Missoula County right now. Ag protections. It is extremely high priority in this code.
Yes, and I absolutely get that. And I don't want you to feel like I was implying that. Okay, great. Yeah, I just
you were
wanted
asking a question. It was a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, just wanted to make that clarification, and probably more for myself, just to understand, like, as a ag landowner, like what do I need to do if, maybe if it falls through the gaps, or like I got 2 young kids and a farm I'm running. If it wasn't for this planning board, I wouldn't pay attention to anything.
It's really important to note that ag is so Lindsay is perfectly correct in that low intensity agriculture is pretty much any agricultural operation you can point to in Missoula County. I can't think of one right now that falls under the category of high intensity agriculture that would meet our definition of high intensity agriculture. We're talking like industrial chicken farms with 40,000 birds per structure. That's what we're talking about, not a working ranch. Now, maybe we could staff's kind of thinking that maybe we could work these definitions a little bit better to be clearer, because the lines aren't the only ag user that has been confused about which one they fall in. And we want to be clear about which one people falls in. So we think we could have opportunities to address that and improve those definitions, and that might help with some of those questions. But agriculture, low intensity agriculture, is allowed everywhere. So if you own a small farm, you own a large farm, you are allowed to, it is going to be a conforming use. You can do it, you can operate, snow knocks down your shed, you can rebuild it.
Awesome. Thank you for all those explanations, and you're making me wish I wasn't in the city. Or at least the city would follow the county's great example. Josh, go ahead.
Thanks, Sean. Just a couple of overarching comments. First, I think I've mentioned this before, but I really like how staff has threaded the needle here between, conventional, traditional zoning and form-based code. I think I described it a couple of meetings back as zoning plus design guidelines, and I think that they've done a very nice job. It's going to help designate the appropriate form and scale, and therefore character, not just distinction of land use types. So that's great. And then with regard to the discussion of the ranch lands, I'm a ranch kid. I grew up on a ranch, and I am not a land use attorney, but under no circumstances would I ask the county to take away entitlements or higher zone density. And the reason that I would not, and I would have no intention of developing that land either, but if I were to go ask for a conservation easement, the value of that easement is much likely higher with higher entitlements. And so I don't mean to make any recommendations or anything, but that would be what I would do. The higher the entitlements on that ag land, presumably all else being equal, I would assume the conservation value to be higher. So, which is beneficial to the ag landowner. So that's my viewpoint on that issue.
Great, thanks, Josh. And could you clarify for me what you mean by higher entitlements? Does higher the entitlement?
So if it's zoned for, I think it was neighborhood residential, is that correct? Presumably the density of that zoning designation is a lot higher than working ag, right? Which I think is one house for 40 acres. So if you were to ask for a conservation easement on that land, the development rights or the development potential that you are foregoing in order to not develop that land, the value that you are foregoing is much higher if you're allowed to put, say, just for example, 40 units an acre versus 1 unit per acre, right? You're giving up a lot more value in your land to say, I'm never going to develop this, and nobody in perpetuity potentially could ever develop this. And so in theory, you should be compensated at a higher rate for that.
Okay, great.
Right,
Thanks.
which
I
is
appreciate that.
beneficial to an ag family that wants to pass that land down as ag land in perpetuity.
Great.
If you
Okay.
have it zoned as ag land, then you've given away all your leverage to a certain extent. But that, that's just my point of view. And that
Great.
may be negotiating against the county, I don't know, but I just wanted to add that perspective.
Well, I think it's a valuable perspective with your background and your family's background, Josh, for sure. Okay, Dory, I think you're the only one with their hand up. Go ahead, Dory.
All right, thanks. Real quickly too, I will just echo how much I appreciate the tremendous amount of work staff has put into this, and really I feel strongly that this is just a real solid plan. And while we're talking about a lot of tweaks and other things that may still occur, I think as a whole, I'm really excited about this. And I too appreciate public comment and engagement. And I have two questions I want to ask, at least for now. And one of those was something that came up a lot in the written comments. And this is a question for staff about the brushy draws that are out south of Roller Coaster Road and north of Deshaw Lane, where it sounds like there's some important bird habitat. There may even be some historic tribal land issues there as well. And I'm just curious what you're thinking about that, and if there's if there'll be any revisions around that. I know that I think the rezone concern is for the medium residential. I also noticed that there's a T3 edge transect zone, I guess, just to the, east of that as well. And so maybe you can just speak to that a little bit if you have thoughts on that, if staff can address that at all. And then I'll ask my second question.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I'll take the T3 Transect Zone is an implementation of the SWIPTA Canyon Master Plan, and that's outside the scope of our project here. So that's kind of like that's a city county plan we adopted about a year ago, and we're not touching with this update. So now moving on to the Deshaw area with the clay hills and the woody draws. This was also a big point of discussion during the Missoula area land use mapping project. So remember that the zoning code is an implementation of policy. And during that process, the land use designation, there was a staff proposal, then the planning board changed it, and then ultimately the commissioners ended up changing what the planning board changed and went with something totally different. And this was based off of public comment from landowners and from community members and from state agencies like Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. So these woody draws are really important bird habitat. They're very unique. They offer, every single species of raptor, I've been told, that is present in the state of Montana has been seen in these areas. From my understanding, the area, these clay hills were also once pretty proficient at producing bitterroot, which is, a really important food source. And forgive me if I'm mixing up, but I think it was the Salish that utilized it. So there was a really good point that the public made in that. But the land use designation that was ultimately adopted by the county commissioners was this sort of like a hybrid between residential and agriculture. And so the flat areas up on top were designated for residential. And that was largely because that area is currently zoned for residential. And it is expected to have sewer and water extended in the future. The draws, though, we wanted to protect, and they were zoned agriculture. So the proposed zoning reflects that land use designation pretty much exactly. So In addition, we also have riparian buffers in the plan that so these draws have that layer of agricultural protection, and then within that you have these riparian areas that are part of the National Wetlands Inventory that are identified in these woody draws. And we're proposing that these areas that are identified within the National Wetland Inventory have a buffer around them, so that the wetlands areas don't get destroyed. So we're trying to manage the entitlements of that property owner, because they have property rights, with the existing zoning and the land use map and these resources. And so we're trying to find that balance here. Because the land use element was adopted and it's formed the way it is, and there's existing zoning on that property that allows for residential development. If we were to zone it for agriculture, it wouldn't be an implementation of our policy. It would be opposite than the implementation of our policy, which could potentially be a regulatory taking. Staff can't support anything that could potentially be a regulatory taking that could cost the county millions of dollars. So the landowner could step up like the Lions did and say that we actually prefer this sort of a land use. We would prefer this type of zoning. They have not. So we're kind of in this bind where, yes, it's fantastic bird habitat. There are existing entitlements we recognize. We cannot zone it something that's the way it's requested because it's potentially a regulatory taking, potentially. Oh my gosh, my computer's trying to restart and update something. Okay, of course, right? So we talked about at one of the previous planning board meetings that we can't do everything for zoning. And unfortunately, in this situation, because of these conditions, we can't achieve the conservation outcomes that probably are deserved through zoning on this property. And that's why, even though we're zoning things, and zoning is a great tool for conservation, that's why there's conservation easements are still a super important part of our land use management tools that we have as a community. So this property would still be super eligible for a conservation easement. It also would be super eligible for a conservation design development within our code, which would allow the clustering of development and provide an incentive through extra entitlements to do so for the permanent protection of those resources. So there's some opportunity there, but I don't think we can get quite the conservation outcome that those comments are looking for through zoning.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. It does sound like, though, that there are some options. It's just not going to be through changing the zoning designation. Yeah, okay. All right, I have another question that kind of dovetails a little bit with that, if I can ask it, which is, and I thought about this when we last had the public hearing on River Road. I raised a question of, my interest in seeing us as a community kind of push people who want to develop land, even though we can't always require them to do, to do better, to do maybe more than just what's required. And I'm wondering if, as part of these zoning regulations, and maybe this isn't appropriate, you can tell me, but I'm thinking specifically about the development options and incentives in Chapter 9, as well as what's in Chapter 11 about sort of the duties related to code administration. Is there anything we can add to Chapter 11 that would just be a documented reminder for staff as they are dealing with permit applications to be sure that we are in fact encouraging, by way of discussion with permit applicants, to really encourage examination of these development options and incentives? Because we said tonight when reviewing, when the staff reviewed this, that, these are sort of a big part of the community vision for Missoula. And so is there a way that we can ensure that staff are kind of asking those questions or making those suggestions to, applicants for permits for development? Yeah, it gets a little bit tricky to do that. I mean, what
the suggestion is basically to include policy statements within a regulatory document, which in my experience is not effective and not a good thing. The best thing you can do in zoning is state exactly what you want and state how you do it. Be clear. So there, we have a limited use of these comment boxes through the code, which I don't think we've used in a policy framework. It's more of a like, hey, make sure you talk to Public Works, those types of things. So we could perhaps look at the use of a comment box, which is clearly not a regulatory mechanism. But to state, some sort of statement, to create some sort of framework around that sort of statement. So we could take a look at that for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Great work, Andrew. You're doing a fantastic job. Okay, Toom, I see Toom's hand up. Go ahead, Toom.
I just had a sort of a procedural question. So there were some really great comments, obviously written and presented. So, but in terms of the schedule, will we be voting on the plan as it stands? Meaning, like, some of the things that were raised as far as some potential, is there any latitude in terms of some of the suggestions or some of the comments, or if and when we vote, we'll be voting on the current draft?
Yeah, I mean, you could vote on the current draft, but then we would we wouldn't be taking into account these comments, right? So, and that's our job. That's what the planning board is supposed to do. And that's what staff is supposed to do, is to hear the public and make changes based off of comments. So our game plan is to actually, for staff to do a lot of the hard work for you. I mean, to really actually analyze every individual comment and provide basically analysis, like I just did with Dory's comments, right? She was reflecting questions from the public, and we can provide an analysis of our recommendation. So the Clay Hill situation, I would explain the situation and make a recommendation that we should not make a change in that location. But then, maybe perhaps based off of a previous comment about agriculture and definitions, we would say we are recommending a change, and this is the nature of that change. And then we're going to document all of that for every comment we received via writing, and every comment that we've received tonight in verbally. We've been writing it down. We're also taking meeting minutes and everything, and we're going to provide that analysis to the board. And so you're going to be able to see that and what changes to the code we're recommending to you. And then the board we're trying to make your job easy. You can go through and be like, yeah, we agree with staff on all these things, or we agree with them on half of them, but on these ones we have questions, or this one we don't agree with them. We're going to make we're going to not go with their recommendation. So that's kind of the way I think we'll operate in order to ensure that every comment is given its due consideration. Yeah, and then we're going to make changes, right? We know we're going to make changes, and so then your motions will reflect that we are recommending the code for approval as amended. So you would be passing on along an amended code.
Okay, great question, Tim. That was crossing my mind as well. Rick, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on one other thing, and I have great respect for Gary Mattson. From being from Bonner Milltown, he's very active in our community, but he had made a comment about mobile home parks being lower density than 20. And I just wanted to point out that mobile home parks are one of the last affordable housing choices for low-income people. And developers can always feel free to make things less dense. And I think it's very important that they have the leeway to have them be dense enough where lots are small enough that single wide mobile homes can be used there. And they can be, well, I should say they're affordable housing. They're not even affordable housing anymore, but at least they're the most affordable housing. So I guess I would say, as a comment, I like the 20 units in a mobile home definition. And I think that we don't need to limit it to make it lesser units, because I think our goal here is to try to alleviate some of the pressures in housing here for people, and especially affordability. And being from Bonner Milltown, we're one of the areas for lower to mid-income, blue collar people to live. So we want it to stay that way, I think.
Sean, you're muted.
Thank you. Sorry. What I was trying to say was thank you, Rick. That's another valuable insight. And just in general, I just want to commend everybody on the board for your due diligence and your very thoughtful comments, and trying to capture not only public comment, but your own insights into this process. I know that it's been a lengthy process for all of us, and I just appreciate everybody's efforts. So I am not seeing any more hands raised by board members at this time. So what I'd like to do for board members is, just to encourage you all to take whatever time that you can and, wrap your minds around this, and whatever you can bring into the next meeting, do so. And if you find issues with anything, once we get, kind of our final drafts, bring those recommendations to the table. With that, though, I do see Shane's hand up, so go ahead, Shane.
Thanks, John. I just wanted to point out that there are a couple of attendees. They have already spoken, but there are a couple of attendee hands up in case you wanted to loop them in.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate you pointing that out. I did notice those hands up, and I think we're going to kind of shift back over here to public comment. Not seeing any other board members looking to speak at the moment. So I think I'll just maybe address really quickly what I'm thinking at this point in time is that we'll take one more opportunity to hear some public comment for the public that are speaking again, or at least in the case of Matt Taylor for the third time. If you're speaking again, please make your comments concise if you can. I don't want to limit you other than to your 3 minutes, but make your comments concise. And then for planning board members, I think we will go ahead and procedurally do our continuation for the public comment portion of this public hearing, and then close the public hearing comment, move on through the rest of our agenda. It's 9 o'clock. I think if we can get wrapped up by 9:30 or so, we would all be happy for that. And then we will come back to this on March 15th. And so with that, I am going to go back over to the public side of my board here. And so I had Matt Taylor first, and then I see Gary Mattson also has a hand up. So we'll start with Matt and then go to Gary. So go ahead, Matt, and for public record, go ahead and introduce yourself again and then make your comment.
thanks so much, Sean, for the opportunity again to speak. Again, Matt Taylor, living in the Upper South Hills area. I just want to make a quick comment that Lindsay earlier noted that perhaps an option is to just further clarify that in RRS1 designation, light agriculture would be allowed, and that folks like those on the Line Ranch would be able to reconstruct their properties to their uses. That is not something that I would encourage or suggest. I again would encourage the designation of these lands into the AGW classification, because continuing to put it in the RRS1 bucket is a slippery slope that just does lead us to future scenarios where the lands may change hands, or maybe there are time limits on the conservation easements, and what is presently an area of working ag land and view shed cherished by all, open space and key wildlife corridor, will become just another sort of parceled off small little subdivision of very high-end homes, often folks that don't live full-time in the area. And I think the greater value to future generations is to keep them working ag lands and protected in large, intact pieces of land rather than parceled up into small little chunks. Again, thanks for the time to comment again, and I appreciate being recognized.
You are welcome, Matt, and thanks for sticking with us tonight and your comments. So we will go ahead and I see Gary lowered his hand. I'm gonna give him a, oh, no, there we go. Okay, Gary, you're up. Go ahead and unmute yourself and make your comment.
Okay, this is Gary Matson again, and I just want to jump on I appreciate the staff bandwagon. Very few of us really appreciate how much has gone into this, that they have put into it. They've been in our community a number of times, and I think most people don't appreciate what they do. And the same thing for those of you who are serving on the planning board. And very few of us appreciate the time you put in. But that a meeting like tonight is really educational, and it helps us appreciate what you do. And Sean, in particular, I really appreciate the way you run this meeting. You've led this meeting. You've made us feel welcome and appreciated, and I thank you for that. So that's all I've got to say, and thanks for the evening.
Well, thank you, Gary. Definitely appreciate your comments and appreciation of everybody's efforts. I guess I don't necessarily need to echo that anymore, but I definitely wholeheartedly support that comment in the appreciation of staff and the planning board's participation and efforts. And just to add on to that, I wish that more of our fellow citizens could participate and see these things and understand like how government works at this level, because I think they would have a hopefully larger appreciation for what's being done on their behalf. And it is my hope that what the county is doing will serve as a model for most of the rest of the state. Because I personally feel like we're gonna end up like Colorado if we don't make some efforts to stem the tide of the flow here of the things that are coming towards us. All right, so with that, I think we are going to go ahead and hold on. Andrew, you got your hand up. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, sorry, before we moved on to anything else, I just wanted to point out there were a couple questions, and I just want to, if those people are still on the line, I just want to say something really quick to those couple questions. The first one was from Mike Regan, the very first comment we got. Mike, if you're still listening, go to mczoningupdate.com, contact us. We will reach out to you. You have a complicated question, and I'm looking forward to one of staff members sitting down with you and working through that. And then the second question came from Jesse Martin. Jesse, if you're still on the line, same thing, mczoningupdate.com. And we want to sit down and talk with you as well. So, yep, those were the two that I wanted to address.
Oh, go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, sorry. Is Jesse still on the line?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. Because I had some pretty quick answers for her, but hopefully she will reach out to us.
That's J. Lee BNM. So I think she is still on the line.
She has her hand raised, I believe, or did. So.
Jesse Martin.
Oh yeah, no, she still is on the line.
Excellent. Maybe if she's still on, maybe and as Andrew said, contact us through our mczoningupdate.com website for more details. But what I can tell her is that non-conforming lots, meaning lots that are smaller than what the new zoning will require, are allowed to continue and be used as any other lot in that district. So there's nothing disadvantageous to having a lot smaller than the zoning district requires. And in fact, we have built in a provision in Chapter 4 that says if your lot is smaller than the zone requires, you can follow the requirements for lots of that size from other zones. So your setbacks can be a little less if your lot is smaller, because you can follow a setback from the different zone that match. I'm probably not making any sense, but rest assured that we've addressed it. It's not a problem, but please reach out if you want more information, Jesse.
Great. Thank you both Jenny and Andrew for touching on those two questions. I had them marked down and was failing to do so. I'm getting a little tired myself. And since you're still here, Jesse, does that if that does not feel like it addresses what you want to be addressed, you can go ahead and raise your hand and I'll give you an opportunity to speak.
That's just fine, and I appreciate your time. I will probably just reach out for any clarifications that I might have.
Outstanding. Thank you. Appreciate that, since we're getting into the late hour. And let me take just a second here. I want to make sure I'm not missing any of the questions that I had highlighted.
Gary Mattson did have one about mini storage in Chapter 5, and I would just say that Gary, I don't know if you missed it, but there is a section in Chapter 5 for mini storage. It's section 5.20 that establishes specific use standards for mini storage. And then also Jay is on the line still. The climate change mitigation, we in fact started out with our draft as instead of having as incentives energy conservation, we had it as requirements for certain buildings to have energy reduction plans, renewable energy, that kind of thing. And our guidance from our attorney's office is that the way the state legislature has drafted state building code, that we cannot require that through zoning. It can only be done through building code. So we had to move it to incentives and make it optional, but we're trying to kind of make it an offer you can't refuse. And hopefully people will take advantage of those incentives. And Jay and Gary and all the others, I can tell you that from day one, the top priority of this zoning has been energy conservation, sustainability, resilience in our development.
Great, perfect. Jenny, that that really rounds out my list there. I think we've hit all the points that we've had raised tonight. So unless anybody at this point in time sees anything or feels like we're missing anything, and again, there will be another opportunity on March 15th to dive back into this when everybody's a little fresher and we can go over all this again. Maybe not in quite as much detail as the presentation goes, but we can hash things out again, and the planning board will be discussing things more. So we're not closing the public hearing portion of this, or I'm sorry, we're not closing the public comment portion of this public hearing. So there will be more opportunity to comment. However, as it is apparent, I'm getting tired. So, and I've been up since 4:30. So we're going to go ahead and move on. So we're gonna continue the public comment portion of this, or do a continuation. So that brings us to a close for this part of the public hearing. And then we will move on through the rest of the agenda. And I don't anticipate this will take us an enormous amount of time, their board members. So with that, we do not have any communications or special presentations at this point in time. And we do not have any committee reports at this time. Tung is our primary committee report with the TPCC, and that doesn't happen until later in the month. Oh, wait, Karen has got her hand up. Go ahead, Karen.
I think that you probably have this covered, but just procedurally, to make sure that it's very clear in the record, it might be best to have the board make a motion and vote on it to continue the hearing to the March 15th.
Okay.
Planning board that's held at 6 p.m. just so that it's very clearly on the record, documented.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate that. I didn't realize that would be necessary. So let's back up a little bit. We're still in our public hearing section. And if we could get a motion for a continuation of this public hearings to the March 15th meeting at 6 p.m., that would be greatly appreciated.
I'll move that we provide a continuation of the public hearing to the March 15th planning board meeting.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Dory, and we are just going to do a yay or nay vote. All those in favor say yay.
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 Any opposed? No, none opposed. So we have a unanimous vote for a continuation for the public hearing portion of this meeting. And again, thank you, Karen, for pointing that out. I agree wholeheartedly that was probably the wisest move, procedurally speaking. So we're on to old business, and I guess I'm kind of curious if Josh, do you want any time to address any of the Highway 93 stuff, or would you like to save that for another evening?
Yeah, just really quick update. I incorporated the changes that Bailey suggested and got an updated version to her a couple of days ago. She's probably really busy, but hopefully in the next or an upcoming meeting, we'll be able to take a look at it.
Great,
So
great.
It's moving forward. We're just slow.
Understandable. And, thank you for, making that effort and working with Bailey on that. I think, as you know, we're all we're all supportive of that, and we'd like to see some movement on that. All right, so that concludes old business. Is there any new business or referrals? Not seeing any hands or anything. We're going to move on to comments from board members, and this can be any general comments that anybody wants to make. Not seeing anything. I guess I have one. I was actually considering on just doing this in an email, but I think I'll just do it here. Just to try and let you guys all know, I had a really brief meeting with Josh Slotnick this last week, who's a county commissioner, for those of you that may or may not know. And it was primarily just in relation to Andy. Oh man, Andy's name is gonna slip me, but some of you may remember a former board member, Andy. If anybody remembers his last name. What was that?
Mefford.
Mefford, thank you. Andy Mefford sent us all an email regarding his ideas and thoughts about why he was not reselected to be on the board. And it was not really on Josh's purview of that email, but Josh reached out to me and just wanted to let me know that the reason that Andy wasn't selected to continue on the board was attendance, plain and simple. And that was it. And although I respect Andy a lot and I appreciated his letter, as most of you saw from my response to him, I think at the very least, Josh, as a commissioner, wanted to let me know, and I felt like it was important for transparency purposes to let all of you know that that decision was made primarily on attendance. And whatever Andy's feelings about that may be, that's why it happened. And I think it, just an important reminder that attendance is important. It's not mandatory. As many of you know, I've missed meetings, and in November, I clearly make it known that I am going to disappear for hunting season. But, let it be known that, staff is paying attention, and, if your attendance slips, that'll be noticed. And, in closing on that, I had intended to talk to Andy, but it became not unnecessary because he wasn't reselected. So rather than send out an email and, just in the idea of transparency, I wanted to let you all know about that conversation that we had really briefly this week. So other than that, unless anybody else has got some comments, that's it. We're done. And I'm not seeing any comments, so I'm going to call tonight's meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.